What are known as limbers and caissons, which are essentially ammunition wagons, pulled by teams of 6 horses. Over here to your left, McLean House and Barn, both original structures. That's one of the few barns that's never burned down, although the wood has been replaced a number of times. In front of us, one of the original observation towers, placed here in the early 1900s by the old War Department, so the students from West Point could get a better view of the battlefield. Now they tend to get their heaviest use in April and May, but it's a neat way of getting rid of some of the excess energy of 5th and 8th graders by having them climb a tower. They usually like it. That one, by the way, used to be 3 times the height. Those are some of the buildings of modern-day Gettysburg College that you see off there to your left. Now, portrait statues, these are standing bronze figures, are usually reserved for Union Division commanders. This is John Robinson from New York, 1st Corps, said to have been the hairiest man in the Union Army. Unfortunately, his jacket prevents us from seeing his beard going all the way down to his navel. Now, over the past 15 to 20 years, Park Service has been attempting to make areas beyond where monuments are look more like they did in 1863. One of the things they've been doing, planting historic orchards like the ones you see on your left, because farmers would have had them here. Putting up stone walls and wooden fences where farmers would have had those. And in some areas, removing trees where trees were not. But notice as we go a little bit further here, you'll see a business, the Doubleday Inn Bed and Breakfast, and also several 20th century homes. Notice that this individual to our right has what is known as a flank marker to the New York Regiment right in his front yard. So what I'm really telling you, this is a part of the battlefield, but it's also on land that was never acquired, either through purchase or eminent domain. So here they sit. Park Service owns this wooded land coming up here on your left. You'll see a number of trees that have boundary markers on them. But if you look at the distance, and as we make the turn, there's a fairly large Tudor-style estate. And occasionally when these properties do go for sale, they go for premium prices. That one was sold about 20 years ago for $2 million. But if you look back now, it's probably a larger building than you thought it was. And look at all the land that they have adjacent to it. Now, I'm frequently asked, are there bullets or artillery fragments still around? Well, there are, but as this sign tells you coming up on your right, don't come back with a metal detector looking for them. We do have a certain number of park rangers who are basically policemen, and there's also a private volunteer force known as Park Watch, who drive around at their own expense, and if they see a problem, they'll call it back into a park ranger. One of the issues we have had over the years is monument vandalism. For example, the peace flag was spray painted around 9 years ago. And there are people who sometimes like to steal metal off of monuments, like maybe a state seal, or a bronze rifle, or a general sword. And almost always that kind of activity is taking place in darkness. It's very difficult to catch the people involved. Now, this bridge that we went over earlier would not have been here at the time of the battle. This would have been an unfinished railroad bed, frequently known as the railroad cut. And they discovered remains, probably Confederate, about 20 years ago, close to where those small trees are in the south side of the cut. They're now buried in the Soldiers National Cemetery in the unknown section. At that ceremony, they had present 2 of the 4 still living at that time Confederate widows. The last one only died around 14 years ago. And the reason she could be called a Confederate widow, when she was 18, she married a man who was 80 years old. So that's how she became the last Confederate widow, an earlier day version of Anna Nicole Smith. Any kids on board won't get the joke. The adults should remember her. Notice the monument under the trees. Ben Crippen, shot to death. They put his image on it to recognize bravery or stupidity. As we make the turn, Seminary Ridge directly in front of us. This is Seminary Ridge now. This is the last stand of the Union 1st Corps at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They retreat to Cemetery Hill. The stone building on your left becomes Lee's headquarters building, the Widow Thompson House. That property was acquired by the Civil War Preservation Trust about 3 years ago. They removed a large motel that just be off here to our left, put the building back to its 1863 appearance, and removed a restaurant which is on the other side. So there's a little bit of battlefield preservation going on. That's, by the way, the foundation of the Dustman House. That's all that's left of it, that stone that you saw. And now we're on Seminary Ridge. 3 buildings here as a part of the seminary complex. All 3 of these will be on the left-hand side. They would include the Krauth House. This would have been the home of Professor Charles Krauth at the Lutheran Theological Seminary. The church coming up, not here. This would have been built in the early 1940s. The next building, perhaps the landmark building in the town, with the cupola on top, used as a lookout by both sides, different times of the day. And then later, a hospital holding up to 550 soldiers on both sides through mid-September. That bottom photograph, by the way, is John Buford, 37 years old in 1863. It's been recently converted into a museum, which focuses on the July 1st fighting, Civil War religion, and Civil War medicine. And for an enhanced admission price, you can see the view that Buford had up in the cupola. Valentine Hall, an interesting-looking Gothic structure, but it was not here at the time of the battle. It was built in the early 1900s. The third building that was here is this one in the corner on your left, minus the garage and the small room next to it, the home and offices of the founder of the seminary. His full name, a little bit of a tongue twister, Samuel Simon Schmucker. No, that would not be the jelly manufacturer. He had been an ardent and published abolitionist, also had 11 children, which might speak to the size of the building. As an abolitionist, when he found out about the Confederate invasion, he's going to hit the road because he did not want to become a political prisoner. So the first day of the battle, what the military might call a tactical Confederate victory. But if you're looking at the bigger picture now, strategically, the Union Army is still in pretty good shape. Reason? They hold that high ground south and east of town, and they still got 70,000 more men coming up in 5 infantry corps. They're going to rally and then attempt to put together a fishhook-shaped line which will be from tip to tip 3 miles in length. The barb of the fishhook would be at Culp's Hill, Bend in the Line, Cemetery Hill, Shank, Cemetery Ridge, and then the eye of the fishhook should be at Little Round Tap. That's going to be 3 miles in length. The Confederate line wraps around it on 3 sides and will be approximately 5 miles in length. Schultz House would have been here, although a plain of federal architecture at the time of the battle. One of the things I'm pretty sure did not have satellite dish coverage. These other buildings on your left, none of these are Civil War era. The oldest of these being Red Patch. That's the building with the large tan wraparound porch, which dates to 1900. The brick structure beyond it, an old Pennsylvania National Guard Armory building, which the Park Service did acquire and used for several years as a cannon repair shop. So, we're driving down what is known as West Confederate Avenue, heading towards Tour Stop 4, which would be the North Carolina State Monument. So where you see artillery and monuments now, almost all of these are going to be Confederate. These artillery pieces are aimed towards Cemetery Hill. Look to your left. It's that tree line to the right of the Blue Ring Water Tower. Although at the time of the battle, virtually treeless. That's mostly landscaping in the Soldiers' National Cemetery, which makes the high ground of Cemetery Hill more difficult to interpret. McMillan House and McMillan Apple Orchards, left and right of us. A part of that building is original, but it's also been expanded greatly since the time of the battle. Now in a moment, as we continue to head south, we're also going uphill a little bit. So in a moment, look to your left, which will also be to the east, and you can start seeing most of the rest of the Union line for day 2 and 3. Cemetery Hill, where those twin pine trees are. Cemetery Ridge, where you'll see the monuments, like the dome of the Pennsylvania Memorial and the obelisk of the U.S. regulars. And then further in the distance, you'll see 2 hills. The tall one on the far right, Big Round Top. Not much fighting in it because it was completely wooded. Little Round Top is that rocky, smaller hill you see to the left of it. We'll be up on it later. Little Round Top made more important because farmers the previous year, who had no idea there's going to be a battle here, will remove most of the trees from its western slope. Because they do that, artillery can be placed upon it, making it a more important position. Are you game for getting out here too? Most of you? I didn't have as much enthusiasm this time as I did before. Yeah. Okay, all right. All right, here's what we're going to do. You see a little path over here to your left. Try and avoid the puddles. I'll meet you near the North Carolina State Monuments. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about Confederate monuments, and then we'll set up the second day for you.